it's me Rizz doing reaction on the channel. This is going to be the American Civil War by Oversimplified Part 1. And before we get to that, remember last week when I talked about that I was claimed by something called America 2? Well, yeah, that happened to the French videos, and when I had a look at the claims, it started to be a bit more clear. As I look at the claim is a visual bit of French Ref 1. So basically this is just being what's it called? The copyright claimed because of the visuality of Oversimplified. I don't know if the owners are with the Oversimplified creator, but not really going to be a huge complaint about it. However, these videos did, now granted these videos, I uploaded these videos because it was sort of a demand, because I was been really busy the past few weeks, and since now there's been a lot of people staying at home. We'll get to that in some other video, but yeah, I'm gonna try something a little different here to see if I can avoid the this copyright claim on my next videos and see how far I could get through it. Okay, we got the screen up, and so now we can finally go.
Okay, Mrs. Lincoln, this is it. One last push, and we're done. 9 months and 4 days ago, my father brought forth upon my mother himself and gave to her a child, conceived in a shack in Kentucky and dedicated to the proposition that I will drink num-nums from a bottle and do little poo-poos in my pantses for the next 2 to 3 years. Now what is it babies do again? Oh yeah.
Why?
I'm not touching that.
Okay. Okay, this.
Abraham Lincoln.
Wait, hold on. Okay, we've got Colonel Sanders here. We got Kentucky Fried Chicken, a mini mini turkey chicken thing, and oh, some nice rays here. Wait, why is the chicken on a plant, and why are they using it as? Actually, now I think about it, would a KFC bucket actually be good for planting? Okay, we're off to a good start.
Grew up with his relatively poor family in Kentucky, eventually moving to Indiana, and finally, Illinois.
Finally got
He read a lot of books.
Wait,
worked a lot.
back up.
Eventually
Back
moving
up.
to Indiana,
I wanna see
and
what that
finally,
says.
Illinois. He read a lot of
Vampire Hunting for Dummies, and that's the famous painting on the left that I don't know what
books. Worked a lot.
What? Nicolas Cage impersonate. That was actually him when he was.
A lot of jobs. Wrote some questionable.
Abraham Lincoln is my name, and with my pen I wrote the same. I wrote it in both haste and speed, and I left it for fools to read. Actual poem by Abraham. Actual poem by Abraham Lincoln.
Poetry, and finally entered the law profession.
Lincoln's Law La Palooza.
Despite being self-taught, he turned out to be
How to read by how to. What?
pretty
Okay.
clever and astute lawyer. In one case, a guy claimed he witnessed a
Is that Batman? Look, that's Batman by the fucking judge. Well, I could. Damn. Ugh, we're coming into the winter season. Jeez, when I start wearing long pants, that's when I know when winter has come.
murder at night. And Lincoln was like, how could you have seen anything in the dark? There was a bright full moon.
The Dark Knight. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
A what? A bright full moon. Can you say that again, please? There was a bright full moon. A dim half moon? No, a bright full moon. That's funny, because according to this almanac, there was a dim half moon that night, which makes you a liar. Well, I got a bright full moon for y'all right here.
Oh, no!
Now that's what I call a rebuttal.
Really?
Lincoln and his cheekbones weren't only
Oh, he
interested
didn't
in
have
law,
his beard
however.
yet.
He also dabbled in the world of politics, serving as a legislator in both local and national assemblies. And what a time it was. Not even 100 years after the Founding Fathers wrote all men are created equal, politicians were already asking, yeah, but what does that mean exactly? It means all men. Yeah, but what does that mean exactly? And not just that. States' rights versus the federal government. What are the executive powers of the president? Is cereal a soup? The Founding Fathers left some of these questions perhaps a little too open to interpretation. And the biggest question of them all was slavery, an ugly mark on what should have been a revolutionary new nation based on liberty and democracy.
Just I think a bit of context here is that first off, it's for both America and to the extent even Europe that America has this being famous for being about slaves, and yeah, that's true in case, but a lot of other countries did slavery, and who do you think sold all the slaves to? I mean, a bunch of African tribes were literally selling the captives that from their rivals. They once they captured them, they sold them. They bought stuff from the Europeans, particular some muskets and certain stronger weapons and a few other nicks and knacks, and got them all to start selling them for selling all of their rival or I don't know. They had I feel like what was it, a sport or something? Like they started going to war just to grab slaves, then sell them, then get more cool shit from Europe, the rest of the world. But what's interesting is that they never discussed that both America and Europe should be famous for stopping slavery as it becoming to the Americas a constitutional right, and for Europe in that same case, but in a more, well, religious and moral reason. Though, in saying that, slavery and equality between races are two separate things. It was, yes, when it comes to slavery, the equality is, they think that equality had to come a lot later, unfortunately, and that's due to which I don't think they're gonna mention this because that comes like it's about like maybe 100 and so on years until equality came to it for other races. And oh, and also don't mention that also the Middle Eastern empires that still did slavery. And if you're wondering why there aren't any blacks, um, well, in the Middle East, well, essentially their dongs were cut off. I'm guessing the the Middle Eastern empires. I said Muslim empires, didn't I? Well, it's almost this. No, it's like saying America was a Christian empire. It's kind of confusing wording. Anyway, we'll say Middle Eastern empires, which yeah, they kind of were. I mean, because Ottoman Empire. Um, yeah, they cut off black men's dongs when they got them as slaves, and yeah, and they made the women as let's see, women were made concubines, and the men were doing, I'd say, mostly agricultural stuff. And yeah, no one talks about this. Also, heck, I wonder if you realize that your own race has their Jesus. I'm just sorry, I'm thinking something. I'm just thinking. Oh my. And they did, and really, they did not put any law on them not doing on setting the slavery involving that they had to they put the law because of political pressure by Europe. I'm guessing the British had a huge role in that, but slavery is one word, and something else can be said to be living like a slave. But anyway, um, I've already started a flame war on my comment sections. Comments. Damn it! Why am I not speaking good today? Oh my. Jeez. Uh, yeah, this is why I don't speak. Man, I'm not speaking right today. Ugh. Anyway, let's keep going.
Thomas Jefferson had written a condemnation of slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but out of fear of losing Southern states' support, it was removed. Hey guys, do you think leaving this a little vague will create any unforeseen problems in the future? Cannonball! And those unforeseen problems were now beginning to rear their ugly heads.
Ugh.
As the nation developed, the North and the South developed along two very different lines, and two very
Then there's
different
Canada
cultural
up there.
identities emerged. Northern cities began rapidly
York.
industrializing, while the southern climate allowed for large plantations of labor-intensive crops.
Okay, here's something I got a question. This is actually a legitimate question. Whenever I see stuff involving, like, during this time, 19th century Southern state plantation owners, did they always look like this? They always had the same type of house, the same uh same footpath or road, as you call it, with all the trees hanging out like this. And I'm guessing that maybe they keep the plantation stuff like there, but I would figure they put it at the back of the house. But was this always the case, or is this because of a few still remaining southern state houses are still preserved like this? Because this, honestly, this looks more of like a hotel, if I'm being honest. It'd be a nice one to stay like a hotel. I don't know. Now, granted, it might be just for peanuts, or not. Doesn't pay. You don't get that much amenities depending on what they've done with it. Maybe they have plumbing and stuff like that. But actually, now I'm really curious. Actually, you know what? I'm curious if there's ever like these southern plantation mansion things that someone rents them out, or like rents them like in hotels, or at least you could rent it out or something like that, of that. uh anyway, let's go. Let's keep going.
As a result, one half of the country didn't rely on slaves, while the other half had become economically dependent on them.
So it wasn't that both sides didn't both sides wasn't that it wasn't a moral dilemma. It was that it's possible that there were maybe some slaves here, but it wasn't dependent on it economically. Well, the slave states, which a lot of their economic growth came from the labor of slavery. And let's see, if I remember, a lot of stuff from this was tobacco, sugar, maybe, mostly cotton, and then a few other stuff that involved slave labor. But and wait, and then at least I know that the cotton was exported to to Europe, and also the tech. Wait, I think also textiles. I think, or was that the Free States? Okay, let's continue.
In 1793, Eli Whitney's cotton gin caused the slave trade in the South to
Ah, wait, the cotton gin. Okay.
explode, while in the North, a growing abolitionist movement was taking root. A general mistrust began to develop between the North and the South.
So pretty much things. So in America's case, it's kind of more or less the same like this, or at the very least, that's what the media says. So it's kind of interesting that there's always the thought that everyone is divided, but that's the appearance of what the media shows. And when you take the time and go to a country, making sure you know your research on it, you realize that they're not what they look like in the movies or in the media. So it doesn't help that you see the worst of each country's dilemmas, or whatever such entertainment news just depicts, whether they show the goodness of the worst of someone and the worst of someone who's good. But I don't know, it's just something to realize that ever since with when YouTube, um, it's kind of it. You start to see when you see people like me reacting to stuff like this, like when you start seeing okay, here's something that maybe be stupid, but when I started seeing that reaction to black people, I have never seen a happy black person, because no one in the media has ever made any black person laugh. Now you may have entered. Now, of course, there were stand-up comedy bits, but you kind of not know if they are genuinely happy about it. Like, it's an audience and everyone's gonna laugh and all that. But when you start seeing like the mostly individuals who start seeing stuff, or start seeing the entertainment that you've seen and they laugh the same as you, turns out they're not that much different. Though, at least when we think of stuff that's humorous, and maybe some stuff it's not humorous to other cultures or other races, but the risk of cheese. And there's a second flame war in the comments section. Well, let's continue.
As Northerners felt the South were hell-bent on
It's gonna be
expanding
a running
slavery,
theme.
and fear spread throughout the South that the North wanted to take their slaves.
Is that Colonel Sanders right there? Actually, what is this character depicted as? Is there a name for what he looks like? Like, what are all these characters represented as? Like, I'm thinking these guys are just... This guy may be a lawyer, this guy... Or, like, a politician. That's just like an angry Colonel Sanders. A plantation owner. Some farmers, or guys who work on the land. Then there's the abolitionist people. And, wait, I think I've seen a painting or some sort of news bit with these type of clothings on, and anyway, I'm just
Slaves away. In 1819, there were 11 free states and 11 slave states. A perfect balance.
So, oh my goodness. Oh, is that a Thanos reference? Oh my goodness, it's already 16 minutes, and we're only in the 3-minute mark.
A happy medium, a harmonious relationship. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm Missouri, and I would like to become the 23rd state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a free state. Oh no, you don't? You're trying to get one over on us. Missouri's gonna be a slave state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask Missouri what it wants to be, and we slave state. Well,
so that's
then,
23
allow
states.
me to introduce to you the newest, freshest state on the scene, Maine. Hey, you can't do that, and you can't have any more slave states above this line. What? The issue of slavery is solved, and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again. You see, as America expanded westward, each new state or territory that was added threatened to upend the delicate balance between the slave and free states. If one faction managed to outnumber the other, it could gain an easy majority and force its own ideals on the opposing side, leaving a huge portion of the population
America's going to take all this
and oppressed. For a while, compromises kicked the can down the road and kept the volatile balance in check, as new free and slave states were roughly added in pairs. But then one loudmouth state just had to barge in and ruin everything as usual.
Yep.
The addition of Texas saw the United States.
Whoa. Okay, I just realized how big Whoa, is that how big Texas is? Oh, wow.
States enter into a war with Mexico, which they won, gaining a huge amount of land out west and creating even more problems. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm California, and I would like to become the 31st state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a southern slave state. Oh no, you don't. You're trying to get one over on us. California's gonna be a free state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask California what it wants to be?
Free state.
Free state. Well, then,
the compromise of 1850.
Allow me to introduce to you the territories of New Mexico and Utah, able to freely vote for slavery themselves. Hey, you can't do that! And we can enter Northern Territory anytime we want to recapture escaped slaves. What? The issue of slavery is solved and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again. In 1854, a Democratic senator from Illinois wanted to build a really cool choo-choo train here and proposed that the territories of Kansas...
Oh yeah, I just realized that since all these states are popping up, they've started to create the railroad system spanning all the way through, was it spanning through all the way from the east to the west? Though, I don't know. When did they start making that giant railway that goes from the east to the west? Because that takes a lot of engineering and actually a lot of stuff that happened going on. But I think that might be during the late 19th century, I think. But
Kansas and Nebraska be created open to slavery, even though they were clearly above the Missouri Compromise line. Obviously, the northern states were like, hell no. But the southern Democrats who controlled Congress at the time were like, well, if you love liberty and democracy so much, then you should let them vote on whether slavery should be legal or not. And so it was. Huge numbers of pro and anti-slavery settlers rushed to Kansas to sway the vote.
wait, sway the vote. Wait. Does that mean that they could have voted in the state, or they couldn't? They were just trying to well, in OverSimplified words, sway them, like convince them to vote free or slave state. What does that mean? Is that like they're gonna vote in the state, or anyway? Let's just continue.
In their favor, and while they were all there, they began to beat the crap out of each other. One of those settlers was a man named John Brown, a former businessman who failed at just about everything he tried and went arguably insane. He was a radical abolitionist and dedicated much of his life to the Underground Railroad and freeing slaves. One night, in revenge for an earlier raid by pro-slavery forces, he and his sons killed a number of pro-slavery settlers in the territory, helping to kickstart years of violence known as Bleeding Kansas. Kansas and Nebraska both eventually voted in favor of outlawing slavery. But from here, the tension began to grow at a rapid pace.
You know, that ad was kind of weird. Anyway, continue.
In 1852, author Harriet Beecher Stowe penned Uncle Tom's Cabin, a best-selling novel that exposed the terrible cruelty of slavery to the world. Oh, how awful. How morally corrupt a nation must be to allow such things to happen. Your Majesty, what should we do about all the starving children working in the coal mines? Nothing! In 1854, the Republican Party was formed, and Abraham Lincoln emerged as a leading figure. Southern Democrats viewed the new Republican Party with mistrust, believing it to be radical and abolitionist. In 1856, a politician named Charles Sumner gave a speech in Congress, calling out slave-owning Democrats with fiery language. If slavery was a woman, she'd be an ugly one, and the senator from South Carolina would like to boink her. Representative Brooks, do you have a rebuttal? Oh, I have a rebuttal, all right. Yeah, here's a rebuttal for you.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, come on. Surely this isn't allowed. I don't know. I'll have to consult the rulebook.
What? Okay. Okay, here's a question. Can Congress fight amongst each other at the... Was it Congress floor, I'd say? So, wait, the Congress floor is like the Parliament, so... Could senators fight amongst each other physically in Parliament? You know, it would make... Actually, that would make Parliament... just videos at Parliament very entertaining, but pretty... I'm just thinking about this, and it doesn't seem... It seems very stupid, but... You know, that would really make... You know, if a fight broke out, everyone would be tuning in on something like that. Actually, maybe not. We might hear about it in the news, but... Anyway, let's just continue.
I can't find anything about caning a political opponent, but it says here I'm not allowed to wear women's underwear.
Wait, what?
Uh-oh. News of the violence on the Senate floor took the nation by storm. Southern slave owners sent representatives...
He has the cane posters, he's got candy canes, he's got the... Tell them about the presentation.
Brooks new canes to replace his now broken one, and on the floors of Congress, politicians carried weapons in self-defense.
What? Whoa. Hold on. He's got a revolver. He's got some kind of musket. He's got a fucking bazooka, and this guy's got what I could pretty much call it the overcompensator.
Which is never a good sign.
You know, it occurred to me, what would happen if, like, if in America every congressman had, like, a sidearm and just see how the chaos comes to that? I know it'd be pretty messed, might be fucked up, but then maybe not really. It'd be a mutual, let's not shoot ourselves in the head moment, but how's that guy even holding this? Like, he's got the giant what? He's got the mega rockets, laser gun, bazooka, and this thing that I forgot the name of. Whenever there's some sort of blurista, a blood, blurento, some early form of shotgun that I can't pronounce or can't remember. Anyway.
In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott case that all people of African descent, slave or free, could not be citizens, and therefore could not sue for their own freedom under any circumstances, undoing years of progress with the strike of a gavel. Now, within all this bitter debate over slavery, there were many nuances. North versus South, Republican versus Democrat, states versus the federal government. But let's strip all of that away. For 4 million individuals living in America, this wasn't about political intrigue or party alignment. It was about the basic human right to be free. Men, women, and children were stolen from their homelands.
Now, Grant, I already mentioned this before, but they weren't, well, stolen from their homelands, yes, but in context, it was that they were they were captured by the African rivals, sold to them to either the Europeans, went off to America, then their next generations were kept in slavery, so by then, over the generations of African Americans that became slaves to them, they were deemed slave themselves at pretty much when they were at birth. So I don't have an answer for that. Yep. It's kind of messed up. You're born a slave. Cool. Jeez. Sounds like a Oscar-winning title. Born a slave.
And brought to the American continent, where for generations they were considered to be property, forced to live in poverty and work from sunrise to sunset. Plantation.
You know, I just remember I saw this movie. I can't remember which one it was. There were these two movies about southern pretty much about like about the South with slaves. One was just the what was it, Birth of a Nation, not the 1915 one. We'll get to that soon, but the modern one, and it was it was good, but I just really liked that remember I really liked the ending bit about the time transition about a young boy who was a slave, and then later he was fighting for the well, fighting in the Civil War. But anyway, it's kind of hard to sum up all this stuff, and summing up any piece of history, it's a bit you know, if I had to have a saying, is that when you pursue looking through history, we have to make sure we have to go all the way back of every single part of history. Or thinking about, like, I'm just thinking that what if you were to describe humans as like fantasy lore,
overseers did whatever they felt was necessary to get the most
We'd
out
have
of
the
their
best
slaves. Punishments
ever.
were often barbaric.
Yep.
Families were regularly separated, and parents could often only watch, as their children were auctioned off, never to be seen again. Thousands of slaves took the treacherous risk of running away, and abolitionists in the North helped many escape via the Underground Railroad as bounty hunters entered the North to chase them down. Leading figures within the abolitionist movement included
Frederick
many significant
Douglass,
free black men
Harriet
and women.
Tubman.
But it's important to note that for
Tubman.
many of the anti-slavery white individuals in the North, opposition to slavery was often an economic issue, not a moral one, as many worried large plantations would take their lands and livelihoods away. Abraham Lincoln knew that slavery was a moral evil, and he regularly
But wait, didn't that kind of happen after the slaves were freed? Like, as soon as they were freed in the South, they pretty much worked in, well, the same plantations that they worked as slaves, but in doing so, it was of a white. They got a wage from it, which they knew it all their life, so they get to decide on how they were treated. Or, wait, did they own the agricultural work that they were slaves of? I'm not sure about that. There's so much detail to cover. There's a lot of detail to cover.
spoke out against it in powerful speeches that helped him rise through the ranks of the new Republican Party. He lamented at the hypocrisy of a great American nation meant to stand as a shining beacon of freedom while also enslaving 4 million men, women, and children. He most famously declared in 1858 that a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Ah, so that's where the saying comes from. The George speech from there's Relationship George and Independent George.
That one day, slavery in America would end. However, even Lincoln was cautious in his opposition. He didn't want to outlaw it entirely, but simply prevent its expansion, so that given enough time, he believed it would naturally die out.
Yeah, that's... Huh. So, for America, they at least tried to hoping and thinking that over time, slavery would naturally go away, but... You know... That doesn't seem to happen as often. That doesn't seem to happen in human nature. Well, at least the history I've looked at, that the things, it doesn't naturally go away. It only happens when a dissection happens. But it becomes a double-edged sword.
Thankfully, history would force his hand.
Yep.
In October 1859, one abolitionist decided he'd try to single-handedly take down slavery by force. Who would be crazy enough to even attempt such a thing? It's our good friend, John Brown. He planned to seize arms from an armory in the town of Harper's Ferry, free the slaves there, and continue south, inciting a major slave uprising along the way. A noble cause, a bad plan, and terrible execution. Brown's men took the armory and some hostages, but were quickly surrounded by one Robert E. Lee and his
Robert E. Lee. Wait, isn't that Wait, he's gonna be in the Civil War, isn't he?
U.S. Marines. Brown was captured, and a couple of months later, he was executed for treason. Northerners sympathized with Brown, but Southerners were like, "You see this? They're coming for us. Soon, there'll be 1 million John Browns." 1 million John Browns?
Yeah. I don't know if you can interpret this as human cotton or it's just the outfit and the razor. It just looks like the prophet just would come from John Brown with a haircut or shave. That hair needs to be trimmed a bit. Doesn't look like... oh my god, he double profits.
What on earth are you thinking about? A John Brown farm? Yeah, me too. To make matters worse, new northern free states meant now...
Okay, you got California, Oregon, Minnesota, and Wisconsin.
The southern states really were outnumbered, and they were...
Okay, so that makes it 33 states.
To feel bitterly spiteful and oppressed. Further fear began to spread
Wait,
in the South when news broke that a really...
Weird lanky guy wins Republican nomination. He's gonna take your
Relatively
slaves.
unknown figure had just secured the Republican Party nomination for
6
president.
cents for
Abraham
paper.
Lincoln, mostly well-liked among anti-slavery Northerners, had made some of the most powerfully worded speeches against slavery of any politician at the time. And now, there was a chance that he, and his cheekbones, could become president. For the South, that would be too much. In the 1860 election, Lincoln's name didn't even appear on the ballot in 10 southern states.
Wow. That is... Huh, I didn't know you could...
But much to their horror, when the final
Okay, we got Abraham Lincoln for the Republican nominee. John C. Son of a bitch, I can't pronounce that last bit. Wait. Breckinridge? Breckinridge? Oh, Southern Democratic. Stephen A. Douglas. Northern Democratic, and John Bell, Constitutional Union.
results came in,
Oh my God.
Lincoln had won by an electoral college landslide.
Wow.
Lincoln himself tried to calm their fear. How many times do I have to tell you, I'm not gonna take away your slaves? Yeah, right, Honest Abe. We've had enough of you Northerners. We're gonna go form our own country. You can't do that. Why not? Well, if you had won the election, would it be okay for us to leave? Of course not. Well, why not? Because that's not how victim mentality works. Many states
Sorry, I was just thinking about that scene from Bender with Futurama where he was kicked out in the casino. When he's saying what he was gonna have when he builds his own
felt that when they joined the Union, they always withheld the right to leave it whenever they pleased. Many people living in
Wait. Could you actually leave? Could any state of the United States actually leave the Union? I'm curious, could they technically leave? Or can they leave? And what would be the ramifications of it? Like, I think I remember, like, there was always, a few years ago, there was some kind of buzz that Texas was kind of going to leave, but they weren't really going to leave. Like, it was big enough to be its own thing, but it's not going to leave, kind of. Though I think this is involving on the trust of, the trust of, well, the United States of America, the entire body of America that's united with all the states. Also, keep in mind at this time, states, the thought of a nation, like a united nation, like, I don't think that has yet to happen in some other countries in Europe. I know at least Italy, they're I can't remember that this stage. I think they're at war, like they're trying to unify all the states together, but there's all this sort of war that's happening between them. And heck, even at this point, Australia was a bunch of was just 6 states, if I remember, at somewhere at this time, and they were like, technically they were united under the British Empire, but as a joined together nation like the United States, I'm not particularly clear. I have to look into that more. But let's continue.
19th century America often felt more loyalty to their state than to the nation. And now, with the South feeling like it had lost its voice in the federal government, they were out of here. South Carolina was the first to go, and over a period of 6 months, one by one.
I just realized that no one left during Christmas or the New Year's.
11 slave states officially seceded from the Union, with just 4 contested border states opting to remain. The seceding states issued a number of official documents justifying their secession. South Carolina proclaimed that it was northern states' hostility to
Let me see if I can read. An increasing hostility of the part of the non-slave holding states to the institution of slavery has led to a disregard of their obligations, and the law of the general government has ceased to affect the objects of the Constitution.
Slavery that rendered the federal government illegitimate. Mississippi declared that their position was thoroughly
Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Ooh. Yeah, I'm gonna
Early
keep
identified
going.
with the institution of slavery, and in a speech, the Confederate Vice President stated that the new Confederate government rested upon what he called the great truth of racial inequality. Revered American generals such as Robert E. Lee opted to side with their states over the Union. And with all the chaos, one New York lawyer wrote that rather than a bald eagle, America's national bird should be a debilitated chicken. And hey, I kind of like that.
Stop making America sound awesome. I mean, really, it's, America can be depicted like that at some times, though when that happens, you're kind of debating on some people strongly like it, some people strongly hate it, and some are like, eh. I don't know. Sorry. This is all fun and games until someone goes nuts on the internet.
One man, watching the crisis unfold, knew it would be his job to solve it. Lincoln was just about to hop on a train and become the President of the United States of America. Hey man, you're hella ugly. Grow a beard or something to hide that face.
Bedell? I don't know who.
Good idea. Still ugly. With assassination plots already underway, Lincoln had to travel to Washington, D.C. under heavy disguise and protection. All along the way, he received stacks of threatening letters. May the hand of the devil strike you down. You are destroying this country. Damn you, every breath you take. Love from... Grandma? At his inauguration speech, Lincoln once again reiterated that no, I do not want to take away anyone's slaves. But for Lincoln, he did want to preserve the Union. He declared secession to be nothing but an illegitimate rebellion. In your hands and not in mine, he said, is the momentous issue of civil war. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. We are not enemies, but friends. It was clear Lincoln was ready and willing to get freaky and open up a can of Scatman John if he had to. Whether he had the support of the people, however, was in question. In the end, it was the Confederates that fired the first shot.
This is not juggling. This is called misdirection. And another
shot.
Huh. So that ad was about magic. Okay, let's continue.
As they seceded, the Confederate States began seizing federal U.S. property throughout the South. Off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, was one such federal property, Fort Sumter, held by a measly, undersupplied U.S. force. The Confederate militia there demanded the fort surrender.
Wait. Haven't I seen this? Wait, I think I've seen this fort before. I've seen it somewhere. Where?
Which was quickly denied, and any remaining hope for a peaceful solution to the secession crisis probably then died when the Confederates did this. The Battle of Fort Sumter is considered to be the beginning of the American Civil War. Many of the Confederates there also considered it to be the end of the American Civil War. They hoped Old Abe would just sigh and say, okay, you win. Unfortunately for them, Lincoln actually said, you're about to get a roundhouse to the face.
Probably.
Lincoln sent out the call for 75,000 volunteers, and
the
men signed up in droves, hopeful for some adventure and good old-fashioned F-U-N.
Why is that guy in the cannon? Yeah.
In the new Confederate capital at Richmond, Virginia, Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his cheekbones had also sent out the call for 100,000 men. As ever, both sides hoped for a quick end to the war. Is it over yet? No, Jimmy, it's been 1 week. Is it over now? No. How about now? If you ask that one more time, I swear I will turn this army around and you'll all have to go back home to your wives and children.
Yay!
But in particular, the South knew the conflict would pose a bit of a challenge. How can we expect to win with a population of only 5 million against 22 million in the North? If you count us 4 million slaves, you'd have 9 million. Great idea. Hand these rifles out. Wait a minute. You almost had me there. The problem for Lincoln was that many of his top generals were getting old and were being a bit too cautious. The commanding general was a man named Winfield Scott, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, and by now, he was too fat to even mount a horse. Okay, chaps, we need to come up with a plan. Hit me. We could wait for the Confederates to come and apologize. Maybe we should all sit in a circle and discuss our feelings. Crossing the Delaware into New Jersey worked for me. Those are all terrible ideas. And you? Wrong video. Hey, I'm the greatest president in the history of this nation. Yeah, we'll see about that, dingus. Eventually, Lincoln's generals came up with a multi-pronged strategy. First, a blockade would cut off and starve the South of supplies by sea. Secondly, taking control of the great Mississippi River would sever the South's economic artery while splitting it in two. And finally, a main Union force in the East would move south and take the Confederate capital, ending the war. Bada boom, bada bing. Skirmishes began to break out across the nation, and the Union Army in the East began to move south towards Richmond. Everything seemed to be going well until they reached Manassas, where they came upon a large Confederate force. It's almost like they were waiting for us. How did they know? As it turned out, spies in DC had sent a coded message to the Confederates warning of the invasion. Did you use NordVPN?
Wait, what?
What the heck is NordVPN? I'm so glad.
Oh no, not another ad!
You used...
Alright, there we go. It's been cut off. Anyway, let's continue.
Secession, Fat Man, and the Union invasion into Virginia. The two sides encountered each other at Manassas, and both geared up for the first major battle of the Civil War, the First Battle of Bull Run. The Confederates rapidly brought in support via rail, and the two sides were about equal in numbers. However, they were also equally inexperienced. A large number of civilians also rode out by carriage from DC to picnic on the nearby hills and watch the excitement unfold.
You know, I should be shocked, but this happened the same with World War I, so I'm not that really surprised. What I have to say, why?
Nobody seemed to quite understand how destructive this war was going to be. The Union forces pulled a flanking maneuver to hit the Confederates on their left, and the two sides fired on each other in rows. Farm families living in the area were forced to flee the fighting, including a man named Wilmer McLean. Hurry up, Martha! There's a war out here! The more you tell me to hurry up, the slower I will go! The Union force saw initial success pushing the Confederates back to Henry Hill. But one as of yet fairly unknown General Thomas Jackson had arrived, and he took a defensive position, standing firm like a stone wall, holding the Union Army off, and finally sending them running back to Washington, D.C. With heavy casualties, the sobering reality of war hit both sides hard, and the North, having just lost the first major battle, had to face the serious prospect that they may not actually win this war. President Lincoln, General Jackson whipped us so hard, the Confederates are calling him Stonewall Jackson. Wait, that's why they're calling him that? Not because he looks like he ran face first into a stone wall? Apparently not. Worse yet, the North had also lost the first major battle out west, giving away control of southwest Missouri. All of this was terrible news for Abraham Lincoln, especially since many of his generals and cabinet already didn't have much respect for him. They felt he was incapable of running a war, because he seemed a bit like your friendly old grandpa. He famously loved a long-winded story and a good pun. I've been so busy, my wife is missing me. But her aim is starting to improve. But deep down, you realized he could also be incredibly shrewd. Oh, Abe, you're so funny. Funny how?
Oh, is this the Goodfellas
Funny
reference?
like I'm a clown?
Yep, it
Abe,
is.
I was just... No, funny how? Like I'm here to amuse you? During the war, Lincoln committed acts that were viewed by some as impeachable. His administration suppressed the free media from printing articles sympathetic towards the South. Some Southern sympathizers were even arrested without a trial. Lincoln's criticizers began accusing him of being a tyrant. But to quote the man himself, "Hey, it's war, baby. What are you gonna do?" By the end of 1861, with things already looking bad for the North, abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass couldn't believe that the Union Army weren't enlisting black men. He continued to put pressure on Lincoln to make the war about emancipation. "Mr. President, it's time to make the war about emancipation." I don't want to ruffle any feathers. The feathers are already ruffled. But Lincoln, hanging on to hope for a quick end to the conflict, continued to fight only for the preservation of the Union. It was decided, however, that escaped slaves from the Confederacy could be held as enemy contraband, and many of these men were put to work bolstering the Union's infrastructure.
Technically, they're not. We didn't enlist blacks, we're using. Okay, you know what? This kind of explains it best. Let's
and
just
supply
keep going.
lines. Hoping to get things moving, Lincoln made young General George McClellan the new commanding general.
Sorry. Wait, why have I have seen? Why does this guy look so This guy looks like fucking custard. Wait. For some reason, this face reminds me of what was it? George Custard. Custard? Cust. Hold on, I'm typing it up. General Custer. Is it Custer, not Custard? Custer. Uh, actually, no. Actually, no. Nope. No. Sorry. Custard does not look anything like this man. I think it's because of the beard or the mustache. No, it's the mustache. No. I don't know. This face looks like somehow it kind of sounds like what's the word I'm thinking of? Douche. Yeah, I get the feeling this guy's gonna be a douche, isn't he?
General, and McClellan began to train up his men. He thought a lot of himself, however, and believed he was going to be the nation's great savior. And
Okay, not that. Okay, I'm not that far off. He's probably going to be a douche in this.
like many others, he didn't approve of the president's handling of the war. On one occasion, Lincoln went to McClellan's house to meet with him, but McClellan was late returning home. He kept the president waiting, and when he finally got there, he just straight up went to bed. Now that's what I call disrespect.
Okay, so all right, douche. My
Respectful. McClellan talked the talk, but could he walk the walk? No. Like Lincoln's other generals,
this is it, okay. When this is gonna be. Oh my goodness, I think that just sums up him. Just douche.
McClellan was maddeningly cautious. Hey man, could you move south and attack the enemy? What? Are you crazy? What if they have a big scary army down there? They probably do. What? Oh my gosh! McClellan worried that he did not have the numbers he needed to fight effectively. What if they have like 10,000 men? Okay, no problem. We'll get you 20,000 men. Well, what if they have 30,000 men? I'll need 40. Okay, you can have 40. Well, what if they have 50? I'll need 60.
Just
Lincoln
fight, you
tried,
pussy.
but it was all in vain. McClellan would not make a move for the rest of the year. The North's one saving grace for now was a general out west fighting in Kentucky and Tennessee, General Ulysses S. Grant. Cool, collected, methodical, and a big fan of whiskey. His chief of staff took it upon himself to keep Grant sober. One officer said that Grant habitually wore an expression as though he were determined to drive his head through a brick wall and was about to do it. And that determination led him to score a number of key victories when others around him were failing. At the Battle of Fort Donelson, Grant was
Nashville.
like, why does Stonewall Jackson get a cool nickname and I don't? I want a cool nickname. Sir, the Confederates say they're ready to surrender and want to know your terms. No terms, just unconditional surrender. Hey, unconditional surrender Grant. That's a pretty cool nickname, right, guys?
Wait. Okay, I don't know. Is this actually his nickname? Or is it just a joke?
Right? Later in April
Nicknames are
1862,
supposed to be a
the
bit
Confederates
short.
launched a sudden attack on Grant's army at Shiloh, but the determined, unconditional surrender Grant threw his lines to rebels.
Wait, that's actually his nickname? Someone in the comments put it down, if that's his actual nickname. This just...
and sent them running. The battle resulted in the heaviest casualties in U.S. history so far, and despite his victory, Grant found himself under fire. You have to get rid of Grant. Why? Didn't he win? Yes, but he just threw his men at the enemy. Isn't that the point? Also, he's a loony drunk. Well, what does he like to drink? I believe whiskey, sir. Then send him more. Lincoln watched as his cabinet did nothing but bicker, and his generals did nothing. But then, worst of all, personal tragedy struck. Lincoln's young son, Willie, very much loved by the president, died of typhoid fever at the age of 11.
Oh.
Lincoln was a sensitive man and was heavily affected by the loss. His wife was inconsolable. But one of Lincoln's greatest traits, what made him such a great leader, was in the darkest of times, with composure and determination, he kept moving forward. He knew it was his responsibility to hold himself and his family together, and by doing so, he hoped to hold the nation together. And he had had it with McClellan's inaction. Lincoln decided he was gonna take control. In March 1862, Lincoln firmly ordered McClellan to once again move south towards Richmond. McClellan insisted instead they move by sea to the Virginia Peninsula and attack Richmond from the southeast. Yes, said Lincoln. Okay, anything. Lincoln held on to some of McClellan's men to defend D.C. from a nearby Stonewall Jackson wreaking havoc in the Shenandoah Valley, and he sent McClellan south. McClellan landed on the peninsula, and he began to move inland. He came up against a small Confederate army that had dug in at Yorktown. McClellan vastly outnumbered the force, but it's said that Confederate General Magruder deceived McClellan by cleverly maneuvering his smaller force and making McClellan believe he faced a huge army. No, you have way more men than them. Move forward. No. McClellan settled in for
Just
a
fight you,
month-long
pussy.
siege, giving time for Johnston to move south from Manassas and Magruder time to retreat. When he finally entered the city and found it deserted, he declared it a victory, calling his success brilliant. Then, after meeting some resistance at Williamsburg, McClellan moved to within just 20 miles of Richmond, his armies able to hear the church bells ringing in the enemy capital. You still outnumber them. Go give him hell. No.
Just fight you,
McClellan once
pussy.
again held back, moving slowly and defensively, and with his army split in two, the Confederates saw an opportunity to strike back. McClellan's advance was halted, and now the Confederates pulled an ace out of their sleeve. General Lee, you're up. Do you think we should evacuate Richmond? No, Mr. President, no need. General Robert E. Lee, one of the most brilliant military commanders of the time, was now in charge. One of his biggest strengths was his ability to read the mind of his enemy, and he knew McClellan was cautious and weak. After moving Stonewall Jackson south to join him, and even though he had a smaller army, Lee hit McClellan in a series of fast-paced, close combat battles that had McClellan spooked. McClellan retreated the Union Army back again and again and again, escaping the peninsula and returning to D.C. Lee had defeated McClellan, and the campaign had failed. Well, that was a major success.
You kidding?
Success? Tell me exactly what was successful about that. Well, we successfully retreated. You lost. I didn't lose. I merely failed to win. Things
You
just
are
kept looking
douche.
worse for the North. At least their navy had seen some success, capturing a number of key port cities, notably when they steamrolled past Confederate forts to take New Orleans. And speaking of the navy, both sides had begun using ironclads.
Oh, ironclads. Okay, this is basically ironclads are just the ships that they're like the in between the steel, the navy steel boats, or and the what would we think as the battleship? Kind of it's like between the regular ships like you see in like for pirates and etc, all those type of ships, to the battleship. Basically, it's just a big it's like an umbrella term of a bunch of big ships, big-ish ships that have a some kind of metal casing on it with usually steam powered with some pretty big guns, or whatever guns are on the ship.
So that's pretty cool.
New
But in the
technology.
East, they
Yeah.
still weren't having any luck. After McClellan's disastrous campaign, Lincoln briefly sent out one General John Pope to attack northern Virginia.
His name
Hey
is
man,
John Pope.
just checking in. How's it going?
what?
Well, the Confederates kicked my butt at Cedar Mountain. Then they raided my camp and ran off with my money and clothes. Also, I appear to have been wedgied. Lee defeated Pope at yet another battle at Bull Run, in which nearby farm families once again got caught up in the fighting. Hurry up, Martha! There's another war out here! I'm waiting for my hair to dry!
What?
Wilmer McLean, sick of war, moved his family south, where he knew the war would definitely, absolutely, never touch him again. But Lincoln had yet another problem to contend with. European powers, in particular the UK, were looking increasingly like they may intervene diplomatically on the side of the Confederates. They were missing their precious supply of southern cotton because of the Union blockade, and they wanted to see a swift conclusion to the war. The tension between America and Great Britain had been increasing, especially after Confederate diplomats were discovered on a British ship.
No, they couldn't disguise themselves by having tea. You need. Oh, right. I almost forgot. If I remember, wasn't there like European European observers on both sides? Like I remember, like I saw Gettysburg, and there was such thing as some Europeans that were just observing. And what's funny, the joke, like there's like this sort of this funny joke I had when I was looking. I was like, okay, so the British person is the guy with the teacup, but I think that's, but also the red uniform kind of was a dead giveaway. uh, now I could be wrong about. Wait, did the British still have that red uniform in 1850? Let's see, 1860, 1850 British uniform. Yeah, they still had the red uniform, at least for the officers and soldiers, but they also had something of a different color. And oh my goodness, they have. What is up with the feather hats? Probably to show them that they are the officer.
Now, after McClellan's failure to take Richmond, the UK declared it impossible for the North to win.
Upload a
Lincoln
video every
needed
month.
something to prevent Europe from getting involved, and after more petitioning from abolitionists, he decided maybe the time was finally right to make the war about ending the institution he hated, slavery. If the North had a noble cause to fight for, Europe would be less likely to intervene. But Lincoln and his cabinet knew before they could declare something as radical as emancipation, they needed a victory, especially now that the Confederates were about to go on the attack. Aware that he had a limited number of men and supplies, he now hoped that if he could just threaten Washington, D.C. militarily, he would gain Europe's recognition and crush Northern morale in time for the midterm elections, forcing the North to negotiate. With confidence at an all-time high, for the first time, Robert E. Lee invaded the North. But on September 13th, the North finally had some luck. Oh boy, it's my lucky day! A cigar in a field. Hey, what's this wrapped around?
What?
Oh my god!
What?
That's right. The North had discovered General Lee's battle plans wrapped around some cigars.
You're shitting me. Did that actually happen? You're supposed to burn that kind of shit. Battle plans like that, why leave it to there's gotta be there's gotta be more detail in that. Put it in the comments. I feel like there should be some more detail to it, like maybe that they were trying to smoke it, but they kind of saw bits and pieces of the plans, though not the whole detail, but the general idea, maybe? Yeah,
and in them, they saw that Lee had split up his forces. McClellan headed out from D.C., and the two sides met in the Battle of Antietam, a crucial battle that would decide the course of the war. It saw the most vicious fighting to date, and still remains the single bloodiest day in American history. But for once, the North came out victorious, and Lee was forced to retreat. He's on the run. Chase him down and finish him off. No. You know what, old buddy, old pal? You're fired. The North had won their crucial victory. Lincoln breathed a huge sigh of relief, and with that win, he was prepared to take a huge step. On September 22nd, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. In January, all slaves held in the Confederate States would be, as far as the U.S. government was concerned, officially free. Throughout the North, free black men and women rejoiced, knowing that if the North were to win, their brothers and sisters would no longer be held in bondage. The proclamation also had the intended effect on Europe, who were not willing to oppose a pledge to end slavery. An outraged Confederacy knew that Lincoln had given the war a new meaning. It was no longer just about the preservation of the Union. Now, it was about creating a new Union, washed clean of its original sin. A Union without slavery.
Okay. Alright. Man, this reaction went for, jeez, for 1 hour. Over 1 hour, jeez. So, yeah. that was yeah, that was I got no words to explain it, but wow, learned something. And I did do some bits of rambling, and probably it started maybe two flame wars in the comment section, but these were fun. So I'm hoping this video doesn't get claimed, but I'm probably going to just alter it a bit, but we'll see. I will see what happens with them. At the very least, I want to make sure that when I upload it, I just make sure I look at it carefully. Now that I've stopped, I'm not so busy now. Um, we're, I'll get to see if this thing gets claimed, and if it does or doesn't, I can make sure that I can take it out and alter it a bit, and let's see how long they keep, doing so. But anyway, that's it for this reaction. Part 2 is coming possibly the next day, and yeah, I know these videos are going to be are kind of late, but now that everything is been busy over here, but that depends on, well, actually now it depends on how fast the video gets uploaded. I mean, geez, it's more than an hour long, so it's gonna be quite a long time before it gets uploaded, and if the bandwidth holds up. Anyway, that's it for the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. It brings a smile to my face, and yeah, I got nothing else to say. But the original videos I had planned are coming. Hoping I'm getting some of those done this week, and I'll see you guys next time on, well, the Rizz Australian History channel. So bye.